A&E's Biography returns to the life of Bruce Lee.
Mr. Marlowe?
Yes?
In the 1969 film Marlowe, in one of his few Hollywood roles after the Green Hornet, Bruce Lee showed why it was never a good idea to displease him. The fact is, Asian actors got little work in the Hollywood of 1970. But what really stung was to be denied a part he had helped develop. The problem was not his ability, it was his race. Hollywood's perfect Oriental Kung Fu master? The Caucasian actor David Carradine.
The Way of the Tiger, The Sign of the Dragon, Kung Fu.
Kung Fu, the television show, had been designed for Bruce Lee, had been written for Bruce Lee. Everything about that show screamed Bruce Lee, and he was not allowed to do it.
People can't look beyond the end of their nose here a lot of times, and I think that's what happened. You know, here they had a potential huge star and nobody really recognized him.
But to give up was unthinkable for Bruce. In fact, he wrote a pledge to himself entitled My Definite Chief Aim. I, Bruce Lee, he wrote, will be the highest paid Oriental superstar in the United States. He pushed himself even harder now, determined to succeed in Hollywood and, as he put it, achieve inner harmony and happiness.
In 1970, he took a trip over to Hong Kong. It was more or less just a trip to visit. And Bruce discovered something he hadn't known before, that the Green Hornet TV series had played over there in Hong Kong. And over there they called it the Kato Show. And he was the star. And it was like a hometown boy makes good.
Bruce became a much sought-after guest on Hong Kong television shows. And Bruce's obvious popularity in Hong Kong led directly to an offer from local film mogul Raymond Chow. Chow signed Bruce to a $15,000 two-picture deal in 1971, and now the Lee family would have to pull up stakes in America and settle down in Hong Kong for a while. The picture that Chow chose to launch Bruce toward stardom would be a traditional martial arts film.
Fist of Fury was a classic Hong Kong story of a young country bumpkin, and he goes to this town and goes to work for this ice factory, and of course all the bosses are unbelievably corrupt, take enormous advantage of the workers, and to make matters worse, push drugs.
Badly dubbed, unsophisticated by Western standards, the film nonetheless gave Bruce a chance to dazzle his fans.
You get out of here. I'm warning you. You bastards can't push us around. You want to fight? I'll take you on.
It was Bruce as his fans loved him, fighting for the underdog.
Say, I didn't know Chen was such a tough guy. He's great.
So we attended the midnight premiere and kind of clutching the seats and wondering how it was going to be. And when it was over, the audience was perfectly quiet. And then all of a sudden they just erupted with cheering and yelling and turning to see where he was, and it was a truly high moment in his life.
The film broke box office records in Hong Kong and then all over Asia and beyond. Bruce grew to dislike Fists of Fury director Lo Wei, but like their counterparts in Hollywood, Hong Kong filmmakers don't argue with success. So in 1972, Bruce again was teamed with Lo Wei for another film.
The big moment in the movie, and probably the biggest moment in Hong Kong cinema history, is when Bruce Lee broke the famous historical sign that the occupying Japanese had put on a Chinese park. No dogs or Chinese allowed.
Hey, you. Come here. You were wanting to get in here. No. Tell you what. There's only one thing you need to do. Pretend you're a dog, and I'll take you in.
told by people who were in the audience in Hong Kong that they had never felt a moment like that in all of Hong Kong cinema history. The whole country just sort of went nuts at the same time. And at that moment, he became a deity to the Hong Kong people.
You came back to Hong Kong, and suddenly, on the strength of one picture, you become a superstar. Everybody knows you. You have to change your phone number. You get mobbed in the streets.
Well, let me say this. First of all, the word superstar really turned me off, and I'll tell you why. Because the word star, man, it's an illusion. It's something what the public calls you. You should look upon oneself as an actor, man. I mean, you would be very pleased if somebody say, hey, man, you are a super actor.
All the heroes prior to Bruce Lee, they weren't real martial artists. All these heroes delved into this technique that we call swingy arm. They just threw their arms around. Bruce Lee showed up and he did it. He was a real martial artist.
Tired of working for Raymond Chow, Bruce now demanded a full partnership, and Bruce would direct Return of the Dragon, also known as The Way of the Dragon.
My favorite film of Bruce's is The Way of the Dragon, not because it's the best story or because it's the best production quality, but because it was Bruce's baby from beginning to end, and there is so much of the real Bruce in that movie.
We'll show him Chinese boxing. Yeah, Chinese boxing, yeah.
The film delighted Chinese audiences because it showed the defeat of arrogant Westerners. It also gave Bruce a chance to have some fun showing off, exaggerating the movements of Kung Fu.
Movement number 4. Dragon seeks path. Dragon whips his tail.
Return of the Dragon is a good first film by a fledgling director. It had humor, it had emotion, and of course it had great martial arts.
It also had Chuck Norris, American karate champion and one of Bruce Lee's friends. Their climactic fight scene in the Colosseum in Rome is the most famous matchup in any martial arts film. This is one of the most realistic kung fu fight scenes ever filmed. And maybe the reports were true that the two fighters were actually making contact with each other. Intimidating to any opponent of Bruce's was his high-pitched ki, the sound that accompanied every punch.
Each punch had a voice, and he would give each one his unique sound that came out, and that was that. It's like freeing yourself of the energy that you build up, the ki force that you build up inside when you're doing this stuff.
The astounding success of Bruce Lee's first 3 films did not go unnoticed in Hollywood. And Bruce would soon get the call he'd waited for. He'd get to make a martial arts film on a Hollywood budget for an American audience. Good news. But the problems had only begun. A look at the artistry of Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon, when Biography continues.